According to the Associated Press, Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams has won the Democratic primary for mayor of New York City. For more, Adam Brewster joins me now from New York City. Hi, Adam. Adam covers special elections and midterms for us at CBS News. Okay, so the election that seemed to never end. So break down the latest from the results in this race.
So today what we got, Caitlin, was an updated round of counting from the New York City Board of Elections that included the bulk of the absentee ballots that were cast in the race. Recall, on primary night, we kind of knew the first choice votes for people who voted in person, and last week we got our first taste of the ranked choice tabulations, how that played out for people who voted in person. You may recall we got them twice because there was a mistake the first time those results were pushed out, and there were accidentally test ballots included. And what we got tonight was the in-person results and the bulk of the absentee ballots, and what that showed was that Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams has a lead over Catherine Garcia, the former sanitation commissioner of New York City, by about 8,400 votes. The Associated Press has called the race for Adams. He has put out a statement declaring victory, saying that they built a historic coalition and now it's time to focus on winning in November. We saw a similar situation play out in the ranked choice tabulation tonight compared to what we saw last week, and that was Catherine Garcia passing Maya Wiley, a civil rights attorney, in the second to last round of elimination when Andrew Yang was eliminated and his votes were redistributed. She closed the gap with Adams compared to last week, but is down about 8,400 votes with the bulk of the absentee ballots already counted.
And Adam, this primary happened last month, but because of ranked choice voting and the first time that New York has implemented this, it's taken to July to get results. Can you kind of take a step back and kind of walk us through kind of how these results have changed since primary day?
So Eric Adams has held on to a lead since primary night. That was the first thing we knew, is that of the people who voted in person, he had the most first choice votes, about 31%, when all the dust was settled. And then we saw Maya Wiley and Catherine Garcia both down around 10%, trailing him by about 10 points. And what we saw as candidates were eliminated who, finished fourth and lower was Wiley and Garcia closed the gap. And it got to be, again, as it stands tonight with the votes that have been counted, just a 1-point differential between Adams and Garcia. So we saw how this, the people who didn't necessarily vote for Eric Adams first, we saw kind of how their vote shifted and how it really favored Catherine Garcia. Adams appears to have just built up enough of a lead among those first choice votes and done well enough with the ranked choice voting among those who didn't rank him first to hold on to that lead so far. But we've seen him come into first, and this mirrors what we saw last week in terms of Adams besting Garcia in terms of ranked choice votes. So, the absentee ballots didn't necessarily change a ton. It widened the gap between Catherine Garcia and Maya Wiley in terms of who was the last person eliminated and to determine the final two candidates. But it was a process where we had to see sort of a lot of ballots counted before we were able to sort of get a sense of what the results actually were. And it's important to note that this system of ranked choice voting replaced a system in New York City where a candidate had to win 40% of the vote in a mayoral primary in order to avoid a runoff. And so, ranked choice voting advocates pointed out no one got 40% from a runoff election, of those first choice votes. We would have had a runoff election anyways, and we still wouldn't have known who won the race until sometime in July. There would have had to have been a whole other citywide election. It would have cost millions of dollars. Turnout would have been down. And so this was able to avoid that sort of situation. Yes, we had to wait a while, but we probably would have been waiting a while anyways, is sort of the message you heard from ranked choice voting advocates.
Okay, so that explains why they wanted to do this in the first place and why they might continue this practice. So walk us through what comes next. I mean, presumably the winner of this primary becomes the mayor of New York City at some point, but there's still an election to get through.
Right. There's still some ballots that are out there to be counted. It's not clear exactly how many at this point, but this appeared to be the vast majority of the absentee ballots. And so we'll see these results certified sometime in the next couple of weeks by the New York City Board of Elections, and then there will be a general election. Eric Adams will face, a Republican opponent in November, but this is a heavily Democratic city. Adams will go into it the heavy favorite. He built a big coalition. He's sort of more of a centrist in the race. He campaigned a huge issue for him during the campaign was his experience as a police officer, but wanting to reform parts of the New York Police Department. But he said, I am the one who can solve this issue of crime that New York City is dealing with right now. We heard Governor Cuomo talk about the shootings that have gone up in New York City and how it's, and he declared it an emergency today. That is something that Adams campaigned on. He was talking about before a lot of other candidates. And as the race shifted from the pandemic to a focus on crime, that really allowed Adams to sort of stand out and trumpet his experience and say, I am someone who knows how to fix this now. I am someone who knows how to get to the root causes so that we can fix this down the road and this does not become an issue again.
What a fascinating race, both in terms of testing a lot of themes heading into next year's midterms and also testing this new ranked choice voting system. Adam Brewster, I know you've been covering every inch of this race in New York City. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Caitlin.